Hello everyone, my name is Pukar Dhital. I'm an English instructor today for Grade 7 and today we'll be dealing on subject question tag. So let's begin the class. So what do you understand by question tag? Are we here talking about normal questions? Well, definitely not. So we have certain set of rules that we have to follow whenever we are dealing on question tag. Okay, so we will go through what those rules are, and it is very important to have understanding on this subject, question tag. So let's begin. So question tag is also known as what we call tail question. Later on, as I start giving you examples, you'll figure out why question tag is also called tail question. And we have to keep in mind few things whenever we deal on question tag. So question tag insert, they are short questions at the end of statements. And one of the thing is question tag is commonly or mainly used in speech. Now, in what manner? So we use this in speech to confirm whether something is true or not. Also, to encourage a reply from the person we are speaking to. So this is how question tag is used mainly in the speech for these two reasons, to confirm whether something is true or not. Also, to encourage a reply from the person we are speaking to. We must keep in mind two of the rules here whenever we do question tag rules. So let's deal what these rules are. Number one, if statement is positive, question tag is negative. And if the statement is negative, question tag is positive. So what do you make out of this? If the statement is positive, question tag is negative. And if the statement is negative, question tag is positive. Now let's clarify this with example. So this is a statement which is a positive, and here we have to focus on the auxiliary verb here and the tenses, of course. Alright, and because it says this statement, if the statement is positive, the question tag is always negative. So it would be isn't he. Similarly, let's deal with one more example. Mary can speak English and now, that in mind, can see. It's a positive statement which will always have a negative question tag. Now let's go with the second rule, which says if you'll always have a positive question tag. For instance, if the statement is negative, let's say for example, they aren't funny. Make sure to break the given question. They aren't funny. It's a statement. It's a negative statement in itself. And keeping the auxiliary in mind, the statement will be, if the statement is negative, the question tag will be positive. So that would be, they aren't funny, are they? Or if I deal with one more example, he shouldn't say things like that. He shouldn't say things like that. No, again, here the shouldn't is making this statement negative, and we are focusing here, and the answer should be should he, and a question mark. Don't forget that the question tag always ends with a question mark. Here you go. So these are the two basic rules. If the statement is negative, question tag is always positive, and if the statement is positive, question tag is always negative. Let's go with a few more examples. Elation likes tennis. See, you can very well tell that this statement is positive, and here in this case we'll have to figure out which tense it belongs to, which tense the statement belongs to. It's simple present. That's why we'll have to answer it. Question tag must come negative, and we must use the auxiliary of simple present, that is, Alison likes tennis, doesn't he? Let's go with one more example. C did not study in America. So here again we have to bear in mind the simple past. She did not study in America, and if this statement is negative, question tag will always be positive. She didn't study in America, did she? So I'll make a chart here to further clarify this statement and the question tag. So here is, first let's work on the negative statement, and here it goes, positive tag. So I'll write down a few examples here. So because the statement is negative, we'll only have negative statements here. You aren't a doctor. Now again, be sure to figure this auxiliary. You aren't a doctor, so you work on that positive tag. Are you? They didn't study for the exam. See, the statement is in simple past. Focus here on did not, negative statement, and it will always have a positive tag. They did not study for the exam, comma, did they? See, a negative, positive, negative aren't, are, negative did not, did. Also bear in mind, there is no possibility you are wrong. The statement is negative in itself, so the positive tag would be is. there. Few things to consider, and be sure the comma plays a very important role here because it separates the question tag from the statement. Every time the comma separates the question tag from the statement, and be sure that you never forget to keep question mark at last. And you have to take care of the auxiliary verb, and also make sure you focus on the auxiliary verb. Does it belong to simple present or simple past or present continuous or present perfect or even present perfect continuous? So it depends on the statement. But the very first thing to keep in mind is a negative statement will always have a positive tag. So how about positive statement and a negative tag? So here you go. Positive statement, negative tag. Let's deal with the examples again. Even you can think of some while I'm writing here. You are a student. Remember, comma is very important, and its question tag would be negative tag, aren't you? And a question mark to end. He studies well. And look at the verb here, studies. It's in simple present. So the moment we see that the statement is in simple present, we put question tag using the auxiliary verb of simple present. So that would be, make sure to separate with a comma. He studies well, doesn't he? Let's figure out with one last example. You could do for me, or comma to separate. You could do it for me. Positive statement, negative tag. Couldn't you? So again, let's consider a few things here. A positive statement will always have a negative tag. We work on the auxiliary verb, or we figure out the tenses. You are a student, separation with a comma, and then a negative tag, aren't you? Studies well, doesn't he? You could do it for me, separation with a comma, and couldn't you? However, there are a few exceptions to this rule, or there are a few exceptions, so as to say. So let's deal with those exceptions. Also bear in mind a few of the tricky negative statements. For instance, remember the rule remains the same. So before we go to the exception, let's have a couple of examples of these tricky negative statements. For instance, he hardly ever speaks. Most students here, they regard this as a positive statement, as they do not see anything like not or did not or cannot, because we generally relate negative statement with did not or can't or hasn't, where usually verb is followed by not. But in this case, he hardly ever speaks. It talks about an action not being performed. It has a negative influence. Hence, we go for positive question tag. So, he hardly ever speaks. Question tag to which will be, remember the speaks, it is taking us to simple present form of the verb. That's why he hardly ever speak. Does he would be right answer. And not does not he. It talks about an action not being performed. He hardly ever speaks. Does he? Similarly, they rarely eat in restaurants. And this statement is negative because it talks about an action which happens seldom, which rarely happens. It talks about an action which rarely happens or which does not happen. That's why this statement is negative, and which will always have a positive question tag. So it's separated by a comma. They rarely eat in restaurants. Do they? So these are the things we should keep in mind, especially whether the action is being performed or not. Let's go to a few exceptions. Well, if the statement is I am attractive, what do you think is the question tag to this? Can we write am I not? Can we write ain't I? Or is it aren't I? So in this case, we go with the third option, that is aren't I? I'm attractive. Aren't I? Which is the correct one. Similarly, as we go further, stop trimming. If you've watched my last video, we talked about types of sentences. So we have to instantly figure out the types of sentences. To which types of sentences it belongs to. Stop dreaming. It is imperative sentences. And in imperative sentences, and especially keeping in mind that this is positive, say stop dreaming, here we can choose either will or want you. This is for imperative sentences where we are dealing with two different cases here. So if we have imperative statements, question tag that follows, it could be positive or we can also go with the negative, provided it is imperative. Let's go with one more imperative sentence. Don't stop singing, will you? Similarly, let's go to the beach, shall we? So these are the few exceptional cases which we have to bear in mind, especially when we have imperative sentences and how question tag comes forward. Now, we should also talk about the intonation. Remember, at the beginning of the class, I did say that question tag is usually used in speech. So in what way does it matter in intonation? But before we go there, what is intonation? Intonation is the rise and fall of the voice while speaking. So if we have to use question tag while speaking, there are certain rules to it which we must bear in mind. There are often the cases where we are pretty much sure of the answer. We know what the answer is, but still we somehow seek response. So while working on the intonation, we focus on the question tag. For instance, there will be instances where we know what the answer actually is, but still somehow we encourage the recipient to answer us, right? So in such cases, the intonation, especially in the question tag, goes down. For instance, we know whom the car belongs to. So if it is, this is your car, isn't it? Our entire intonation focuses here on isn't it. So the case is, you know whose car you're talking about. You know whom the car belongs to, but still you seek an answer. So in that case, this is your car, isn't it? Your intonation while pronouncing isn't it, it goes down, it falls down, your voice level falls down. The second case is when we are not sure, and seek an answer or information. So you might come across cases where you just don't know what the answer is, or perhaps you're seeking some information, alright? So in that case, when you want to know the answer, alright, then your intonation goes high. For example, let's say there is a certain person who is from France, but you're not quite sure whether he's from France. You just have no idea. So you might want to ask, he is from France, isn't he? So see, the entire intonation here is focused on isn't he. The moment you are high, it gives a message that you just don't know or have no idea what the answer is. You seek an answer. The moment you are low in the question tag, in fact, alright, that shows that you know the answer, but still you want the person to confirm it to you or to confess to you the true answer. So this is how the intonation also plays a role in question tag. So these are the few rules we have come across in question tag so far. And of course, you can also make a table here: negative statement, positive tag, and positive statement, negative tag. And do work out on the exceptions as well. And perhaps you want to know more about the exceptions. So you can create your own statement here and provide a question tag to it. This way you can create 5 negative statements. Similarly, you can create 5 positive statements. And do write on at least 3 exceptions. And this shall be your homework. So this much for today, and if you have any queries, you can feel free to email us at learning@deerwalk.edu.np. Thank you very much.